Yo, what's going on, guys? We're going to do the grading of free agency, and then we're going to hit some rumors. I think we're going to run through this one pretty quickly. So let's get right into it. We're going to grade free agency to start today's show. And the way that we're going to do it is I took some screenshots from my works website, hoopshype.com. Go check out our free agency tracker. And I'm just going to go from there. That's kind of how I think it's the best way to do this. And yeah, I think we can just hop right in and we'll just run through all the teams. And this is only going to include, I guess we would say, teams that made either they re-signed a player that was in free agency, not a direct re-signing, or they added someone through free agency. It's just something that happened day one or day two. So let's get right into it and let's talk about these grades. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think of my grades for said players? So let's get to it. And with the first one, first off, let's go ahead and make this pretty. We're going to go with the Utah Jazz. I gave the Utah Jazz a C, as the only player they brought in through free agency is Drew Eubanks. And I have no problem with the addition of Drew Eubanks, especially with this team that they need a reserve big man. And Drew Eubanks, 27 years old. The man's went to Oregon State, and he's at this point played for the Spurs, played for the Blazers, Suns, now on the Utah Jazz. I just think they get themselves a really level-headed big man that he's not going to knock your socks off or anything by that means, but he's got a solid feel for the game. He's going to come in. He's 6'9", 250. He's going to rebound well. He can make a little bit of passes through some DHOs or out the elbow or the low post. He's a great hustler, plays with good energy, can block some shots, and he'll finish stuff inside. He's not going to blow you away, but 60% from the field last year, 64% the year before, career 6 points, 5 rebounds a night. Pretty solid for a team that I think last year, John Collins, Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, it was cool. It wasn't as smooth as people were hoping it was going to be. In part, I think this is why they went out and they got themselves, I think, a really good reserve big man. And that's the thing. Drew Eubanks, I think, is one of the better backup big men in the NBA. So that's the only move they made, though. It's still, they're at this weird intersection that we don't know what what their future is. But now their front court, they have Walker Kessler, Drew Eubanks, Kyle Filipowski, John Collins, Lauri Markkanen, Taylor Hendricks, Kenneth Lofton, and Darius Baisley. So kudos to them. Next, San Antonio. We gave the San Antonio Spurs a B. They're another team that they've only made one move so far. And why a B? They got Chris Paul. Did they pay Chris Paul a little bit of money, $11 million? Yeah, but the idea that Chris Paul is going to start, you have Devin Vassell next to him. You have probably, I would assume Keldon Johnson's going to go back into the starting lineup. That's what I would do. And you have Victor Wembanyama at power forward. You run center, Zach Collins, and unless you trade for somebody, then off the bench now you have Trey Jones, Stephen Castle, who can either learn to be a point guard and he'll actually be a good point guard. I think he's more of a Marcus Smart. And then you still have Malachi Branham, Blake Wesley, Charles Bassey, Raycon Gray, Jamare Bouye, Devontae Graham, C.D. Sissoko, Harrison Ingram, Juan Nunez. It's a solid roster. I just think bringing Chris Paul allows Trey Jones, who's I think one of the better backup point guards, but he's more of a pass-first defensive guy. And then it allows like Castle to maybe also be the backup wing if they need him to be. I think there's still a move to be made for the Spurs, either via trade or through free agency. I gave the Suns a B+. I feel like for a team that had to go into the bargain bin, everybody who's been following the channel all the latter half of the season, like once we start doing our offseason predictions and our offseason videos, you guys knew, first off, my girlfriend's favorite player is Mason Plumlee, but I thought Mason Plumlee was a big that teams were, if you're a contending team that wanted to go buy a big of committees, he was going to be someone that you were going to be able to get for a bargain. 3.3 million salary this season, solid. You go out and get Monte Morris, who was on a team that made it to the conference finals. I really thought pair those guys with the rookies that they brought in, three of them, or I guess three rookies, Ryan Dunn, Jalen Bridges, and Oso Iguodaro, great pickups. And then you have Colin Gillespie, who they brought in a two-way. And if he stays healthy and if they need to elevate, he's solid. I think this is a team that now you'd assume maybe Monte starts, unless they're going to continue to run Beal and Booker, then Grayson Allen, Durant, Nurkic. And then if Monte doesn't start, and like I said, the Beal Booker, you have the Morris, Nazir Little, Royce O'Neal, Bol, Mason Plumlee, David Roddy, and Ryan Dunn off the bench before you get to the rookies. And Colin Gillespie, I think that's a pretty solid team right there. I would not complain about that one if I were a Phoenix Suns fan. That's why I gave them a B+. Good pickups, even though there's just two. We talked about it before. Philadelphia so far are one of the winners of free agency. They've built a squad. Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre, Paul George. I know they don't really have a starting power forward yet. It's Paul Reed, unless they're really confident in Paul Reed. Then Joel Embiid. They have Andre Drummond as the backup, Eric Gordon as kind of like the sixth man. They have Ricky Council as a backup wing, and Jared McCain as a backup shooting guard, and then Adem Bona as another backup big. They still got some moves that they got to go figure out, but right now they got their starting lineup. They have their like 7 or 8 man rotation, and really solid. And they still have money to spend. Orlando, they had money to spend, and I think they spent it wisely. They didn't go out and they didn't overspend. They didn't play their hand. I think they did a really good job of, it's Contavious Caldwell-Pope. They bring back Gary Harris. They renegotiate and extend Jonathan Isaac. They bring back Mo Wagner and go bits today. I really like this team. You have the lineup with Jalen Suggs, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, and Wendell Carter as the starting lineup. That's going to be with Mo Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, Cole Anthony, and we'd assume Anthony Black and Goga Bits today as the backups. And then you still have Caleb Houston, Jet Howard, and Tristan Da Silva to round out the team. I gave it a C+ because I think Contavious Caldwell-Pope and re-signing your players are the safe option. At this point, I fully expect him to bring back Markelle Fultz on a minimum contract. The Milwaukee Bucks, I gave them a C because for a team that has dire needs, you'd think people would be taking discounts to come play for them. And I know their roster is only almost filled out. They have a lot of young guys. That's a theme that they're doing right here, which scares you to think that, like, are they close to blowing it up because they have all these young guys? They have 3 guys on 2 ways, which are Jalen Galloway, who I really like from Australia, Stanley from Detroit that they just brought over, Ryan Rollins are the 3 2-ways. They brought in this year's draft Tyler Smith, who's like John Collins 2.0. He'll be their like third string big behind Portis and Lopez. And then they have Chris Livingston, Marjon Beauchamp, Andre Jackson behind Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton still. And they have Pat Connaughton and AJ Green and Damian Lillard and AJ Johnson. And really the only guy they brought in besides Stanley is DeLon Wright, which I really like as a backup point guard. But you're telling me that basically besides the starting lineup of Lillard, Connaughton, Middleton, Antetokounmpo, and Lopez, those 5 dudes, and Portis and Wright, those 7 guys are your only veterans. The rest, it's AJ Green, Andre Jackson, AJ Johnson, Ryan Rollins, Stanley, Chris Livingston, Tyler Smith, and Jalen Galloway, and you're supposed to be a contending team. Where's the contending team discount? Just what happened to that? The Clippers are the other team that won free agency so far, and they are a team, listen to this, Derek Jones, Nick Batum, Chris Dunn, Mo Bamba, Kevin Porter. I know some people, and even myself, does Kevin Porter signing, like, I don't know if it happens in the offseason, but if he has like a really good first half of the season, does that incentivize them to maybe move on from Norman Powell or somebody? We know that they're trying to trade Russell Westbrook and PJ Tucker. And they brought in Chris Dunn, who I love because he's going to be next to Bones and James Harden. And I love that. They bring back James Harden on a solid deal, short commitment. I like the Derrick Jones. I just think they were like, okay, we won't keep you, Paul. We'll just redistribute the wealth. Now, let's go to Indiana. They got a C+ because for a team that they just did it with Obi Toppin, and before that they did it with Jalen Smith, and now they're going to do it with James Wiseman, even though he's going to be the third string big man behind Isaiah Jackson and Miles Turner, and there's still Jarris Walker and Obi Toppin, Pascal Siakam in front of him in the front court, and even maybe a little Kendall Brown and Enrique Freeman. I think James Wiseman, who I've said maybe develops into like a Mitchell Robinson guy, I just think it's just a really good reclamation project, low risk, high reward for them. And they've proven time in and time out that they do a good job of finding another man's trash and making it their treasure. Golden State, I think I gave them a B+ because they bit the bullet. They moved on. They broke up the dynasty. And they brought in DeAnthony Milton and Kyle Anderson. They got themselves some size in the front court with a combo forward who can even be, I guess, a small ball big, but I wouldn't really do it. And then they got themselves a really good defender. But basically what they did was they said, hey, we need defense. This is something that we haven't been, quite good at, and we need to improve on it. So we're going to go ahead and make a commitment to get ourselves some quality defenders in Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Milton, and their short commitments, so they're not putting themselves in any sort of juxtaposition by bringing them onto the team. Detroit, I gave him a B because it's just Tobias Harris, and he's the scorer that they need. And also, I guess they extended Cade Cunningham, but they needed to do both of those things. Bring in a guy that's going to help take off the heat from Cade, and which will allow Cade to play a bit more efficient and not need to play hero ball. They need to bring back Simone Fontecchio. But besides that, it's another year, and it's the first year of a new regime, of a good regime, in my opinion. I just think Tobias, you give him a big deal, it just gives you a guy to help out Cade, and it's somebody who's been to the city before and who has a tie to the city. So I just think that's really good for them, and it works out well. Dallas, the other winners of free agency, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, and Quinn Grimes. They said, okay, Derrick Jones, we'll replace you with Najee Marshall. Solid pickup. Pretty solid, like jack of all trades, defensive guy. He can handle the rock a little bit. He can defend. He's not the best three-point shooter, but he'll jack him up. And he can play multiple positions. They bring I know Quinn Grimes was a trade, so it wasn't free agency, but I just like that. I wanted to mention it. And then obviously the cherry on top was Klay Thompson. For a team that just made it to the finals, yeah, they lost 4-1, but they made the moves for a team that is hungry to get back. Chicago, I gave him C+ because I really like the Jalen Smith pickup. Same thing with Josh Giddey, but Jalen Smith, I thought it was a cheap deal. A guy who is a really good microwave front court player who still has some potential, but even if it doesn't, if he's still the same guy that he is right now, he's just a guy who comes in, puts up three-pointers, blocks, protects the rim, and grabs rebounds. And for even if they still want to compete as a playoff team or if they want to rebuild, either direction, he fits that because he can either be a guy who's a bridge player for a rebuilding team, or if they're a team that they still want to compete for the playoffs, he's a guy who can come off the bench or be a spot starter. I like it. Boston, we gave him an A, even though they didn't sign anybody. They just re-signed all their dudes, and they wanted the championship. So I feel like that's what a championship contender should be doing, in my opinion. And yeah, that's it for our grades. A for Boston, C+ for Chicago, A+ for Dallas, B for Detroit, B+ for Golden State, C+ for Indiana, A+ for Los Angeles, C for Milwaukee, C+ for Orlando. Philadelphia gets A+, Phoenix gets B+, San Antonio gets a B, Utah gets a C, and that is it. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments about that one. But I just think, like, when you look at this, it's a solid grading for, I don't know, for the whole first 2 days because of how free agency works. There's no point in doing the other days, as just free agency doesn't work like that. So I just thought it was good. So let's get into the rumors and the topics that we wanted to talk about today. And there's a plethora of them. As I touched on earlier, they're going to be, if we wanted to give you a little preview, what's next for the Chicago Bulls, what's next for the Los Angeles Lakers, Kyle Kuzma's future, what Wizards might trade him, Precious Achiuwa has received interest from contenders, open to signing with the Knicks. Cavaliers unlikely to trade Darius Garland due to lack of strong interest. Phoenix Suns signed Monte Morris to a one-year deal. DeMar DeRozan may sign a one-year deal, re-enter free agency in 2025 with more teams having cap space. And the Los Angeles Clippers are interested in, yes, Miles Bridges. Oh, hey, buddy. Didn't see you there. I miss you too, buddy. If I had time to do the show, we would do it. Right now I'm doing this because go get your Eagle Bites, buddy. All right, let's get right to it. And I guess we're going to start with the Lakers news, which isn't what I thought I was going to do. But, well, all right. We're going to start with the Los Angeles Lakers. And this is interesting. I'll be the first one to admit it. I think the Los Angeles Lakers are a team that you sit here and they're somewhat at a crossroads. LeBron James was willing to take up to $20 million less. And we know DeMar DeRozan might take a pay cut this season. He said he won't do the mid-level exception, so they would have to shred salary to get him, but that he would take less money to do a one-year, basically prove a deal and re-enter free agency next year when teams have more money next season. But at this point, what do we do if you're the Los Angeles Lakers? I think this is interesting. As the Lakers, we know DeRozan, as I mentioned, is a California native and has been linked for a homecoming, and they've had exploratory interest. We know the Miami Heat and DeMar DeRozan also have mutual interest. That one just I just don't see the Heat. The Heat never do stuff like that. So look, and we know the Clippers are looking at that, but they've spent all their money that they would have done it. So as of right now, we see that Jeremy Grant is another person who's represented by Clutch Sport. Shot 40% from three last year, had just under 21 points. He can guard all four positions and arguably play the 2, 3, and 4 if you needed to. They have the $18.7 million in D'Angelo Russell that they could trade. So the thought is a sign and trade isn't going to work for DeMar DeRozan. It's going to be quite hard. It require them to give up a lot of players. I mean, I believe just to do the trade, it would have to be Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, and D'Angelo Russell for DeMar DeRozan, and he's taking a pay cut, and it's a one-year deal. I feel like that's a robbery. So if they can't get anybody, they're going to go ahead and LeBron's going to take the max. I personally think that is a travesty if that's how this free agency plays out, when you had a guy who hasn't taken a pay cut since the year he went to Miami, and he was saying, I'll do it this year. You had Klay Thompson. You had who else? You had DeMar DeRozan. I mean, at this point, does LeBron want Miles Bridges? Can we work out Miles Bridges? I don't see if, and I don't think Contavious Caldwell-Pope was on that list. So I just think Miles Bridges is the only guy who's like a 20 points per game scorer in free agency, who's able to play multiple positions, play some defense, and can actually be like the third guy next to these two dudes. Buddy Hield, at this point, could you convince LeBron and say, look, we know we'll trade D'Angelo Russell to would you trade D'Angelo Russell and Gabe? What if you say D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, and a first round pick for Jeremy Grant, and then you go into free agency and you ask him, would you still take that pay cut? And we try to bring in a combination of Buddy Hield, and then some defense, maybe an Isaac Okoro or a. I don't think you should bring in vets. I think unless I don't. Yeah, I want to bring back Torian Prince. Lonnie Walker would be a cool guy. After that, Kyle Lowry, Pat Bev. I mean, Pat Bev didn't really work when there, but Jetty Osman, somebody, a Daniel Tice, Simone Fontecchio are all people that I think they need to be considering. Just feels like they just let this one slip through their fingers. What do I know, though? I don't run the organization. All right, let's talk about how I feel like right here for what this is. The Chicago Bulls are in a weird position. They could go either way. I think they've made moves where if they want to rebuild, they have Kobe White, Josh Giddey. Would you trade Kobe White? I think you keep because it'd be a quick rebuild. All you'd have to do is find the franchise guy. Or if DeMar DeRozan's gone and you're trying to move Zach LaVine and you're trying to move Vooch, I like the idea of having Stick Smith because Stick Smith, he's either a really good backup or he's a good bridge player if you need to rebuild. And you have Dalen Terry, you have guys like Kobe White, Giddey, Pat Williams, Ayo DeSumo, Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, Bit Team. And then you have people you can trade in Javon Carter, Nikola Vucevic, Torrey Craig, Lonzo Ball, and Zach LaVine. It might be hard to trade some of those guys, but you can go in either direction. You can be a play-in, maybe a 6 seed, or you can figure it out. And Chicago's already traded Alex Caruso. DeMar DeRozan seems to be leaving via free agency unless it's a signing trade. As I've said before, it seems like the Lakers, they can't do a sign and trade. The Clippers, they're not doing it anymore because they spent the money that they would have given DeMar DeRozan in a sign and trade. And then with that being said, if those two are gone, there's the Miami Heat. And even if it's the Heat, it'd be the only, I mean, unless they're trying to dish Tyler Hero, I just don't really see a deal being out there for DeMar DeRozan. So I think they're just losing him uncompensated. So what do you do next? And we know they're just trying to dish Lonzo Ball. Do they call up a team like the Nets and they say, take Lonzo Ball and Vooch, and we'll just take Ben Simmons and we're going to buy out Ben Simmons or just cut him and he can go wherever for $43 million? I think they need to lean into the youth movement and the roster, because if you trade everyone correctly, you can go into next season with Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Ayo DeSumo, and Dalen Terry as your 4 guards. Then you have Buzelis and Pat Williams as your 2 forwards. You would probably have to go out and get some backups. And then you have Jalen Smith and Julian Phillips as your 2 centers, you would say. And then you trade Javon Carter, Lonzo Ball, and Zach LaVine and Vooch and Torrey Craig. You have like Andrew Funk and on your out, but like we don't know how impactful they'll actually be. What would you guys do and why? I definitely think it's interesting. If the Bulls traded Lonzo Ball for Bruce Brown, I feel like you're just sending money off. And yeah, can you get him for a buyout? I don't know what you're doing with Zach LaVine. Can you buy him out at this point? I don't know. I just think it's a very hard situation for Chicago. Alrighty. Let's talk about DeMar DeRozan, and we've mentioned it in the beginning of the video. We'll continue to talk about it now. What is it specifically that we're hearing? It's a 1-year prove-it deal. We've heard the Lakers, Clippers. The Clippers have fallen out because they've spent their money, but we've also heard the Lakers and the Heat as 2 teams. So they want to do a sign and trade. However, DeMar DeRozan is realizing there's no money out there and that he's saying he's not going to take the mid-level exception, which is like $12.9 million, that he's only going to take less money if it's a 1-year deal so he can go back into free agency next year. Now, what does that mean? Where does he go? And also, you have to understand, DeMar DeRozan going to specific team, what if the Kings are the dark horse? Because he's a Cali guy and he's just like, crap, I'll just go there. Or like the Golden State Warriors. But that's not happening. I was just joking around. He is a guy that I think he wants to make his money, but he also probably wants to be put in a situation. He has to be in a situation where he can play his style of basketball. He doesn't fit every team because of his ISO-centric. So for me, he should have taken that 2-year, $80 million deal if he got it. But look, the 1-year deal works out if it goes well. So with DeMar DeRozan leaving the Bulls and teams deciding to spend their cap space on other players, DeMar DeRozan may be taking a 1-year deal at a lower contract figure than anticipated in order to become a free agent next year when far more teams are projected to have cap space. If DeRozan chooses to do a sign and trade, he has to sign a 3-year deal and is unable to recoup his value, as he'll definitely go down by 3 years' time. So Adrian Wojnarowski says, well, I think there's an interest in DeMar DeRozan, but that's kind of the contract that he might want just is not going to be available. It's not left out there in the marketplace. The Bulls are more than willing to work on a sign and trade agreement to get him the years and money that he might want, but with the new salary cap rules those are much more difficult for teams to do. The Lakers have interest. How do they acquire DeMar DeRozan? That becomes a much different scenario. LeBron James has talked about willingness to take significantly less money to open up the mid-level exception. I think DeMar DeRozan's case, it may not be as appealing to him, but it may look like a 1-year deal somewhere. Let the market reset next year, because if you do a sign and trade, it's going to be at least 3 years, and now you're locked into a 3-year deal at the number you may not like. The Lakers are interested, but the mechanisms that will allow them to create a slot to acquire him, that's going to be a harder part, and it's tough when you give out big money, and there's not always money left for a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who was an all-star recently, but we'll see what happens, end quote, Adrian Wojnarowski said. And at the end of the season, we heard, again, as I mentioned earlier, DeMar DeRozan had that 2-year, $80 million deal, and he turned it down for a longer deal. And similarly, when he challenged free agency in 2021, he had a challenging free agency, and he signed a 3-year, $85 million deal that he has outperformed. And the Clippers and Lakers were options then. So it's just interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? What would you guys do? I'm very curious to hear your opinions on this whole situation. All right. Monte Morris. Come on down. Is it Phoenix? Yeah. I don't know why I almost said Scottsdale, but Monte Morris, he was a guy last year. He missed a lot of time due to injury, but he ends up finishing the year with the Timberwolves. He was a guy who averaged 5 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists in 33 games with the Pistons and T-Wolves. He's either going to be the starting point guard or the backup to Booker and Beal. And this is a team that their biggest weakness was the point guard position. It's a 1-year deal, very cheap. Is it going to be enough to help this team? That's the question, obviously, everybody wants to know. And Monte Morris, he's not going to be an incredible defender. He's not an elite passer, nor is he an elite scorer. He's like middle of the road for everything. He's more of a really good backup than a good starter. For what was available out there and for what they got, I think Phoenix got the best that they could do. I also think they were smart, in my opinion, as they brought in Colin Gillespie. So you could say that Morris and Gillespie, hopefully they bring in another point guard veteran to come in behind so they have somebody, as I rather have legit guards than have Beal and Booker continue to run. But it's not the end of the world. They do that. However, having Morris out there, even though he wasn't someone that you would say wasn't really necessarily impactful for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the playoffs, I think depth is going to be helpful for the Suns, as we saw at the end of the season. I just think they ran out of gas, and going out and getting themselves depth, especially a player like Monte Morris, who's played for the Nuggets, who's played for the Wizards, who's played for the Timberwolves. So, 2 teams that have made deep runs with him on the roster, I think is really big for them, as it allows them to have someone that they can trust, that he's going to come in and he's going to do his job like he's supposed to. And for me, what else can you ask? What else can you ask for? Especially when you have a team as young as, or not as young, as old as the Phoenix Suns, but their bench is as young as the Phoenix Suns. Because for how old their bench is, you got yourself guys like Bol, David Roddy, Ryan Dunn, Galipse, Jalen Bridges, Osu Iguodaro, and Naz Little, who are expected to play big minutes behind Monte Morris and Royce O'Neal, and then the starting five of Nurkic, Allen, Durant, Beal, and Booker. So it's just something to think about. Definitely when you look at the team. All right. Precious Achua. Have you guys been following this? I actually really like this. I'm happy that I really, 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 really like this. They lose Isaiah Hartenstein, which I don't like, obviously. But they lose Isaiah Hartenstein and they don't get scared. They say, okay, we have the restricted free agency of Precious Achua, and that's fine because when Mitchell Robinson was out, Precious Achua, it's crazy to think about when Precious Achua first came into the league with the Heat, people loved him. They thought he was going to be Bam's running mate. And then he was part of that trade package for Kyle Lowry. And he has a really good start with the Raptors, and then he falls out of favor, and then he ends up here in New York. And I think he's somebody that people don't realize, but Precious Achua is a fantastic basketball player. So the whole point we're getting at is this is a team that they recently lost Isaiah Hartenstein to the New York Knicks. He was a big part of them. So as free agency started, instead of taking the 4-year, $72 million deal that they could have given him, he took the 3-year, $87 million. And they have Mitchell Robinson. They have, obviously Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson. And they can play small ball with Randle. And they have Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. Now, Precious Achua, who they actually declined his tender his qualifying offer. I misspoke there. He's received several offers from contending teams, but he's a guy who played basketball in the Bronx and is from the area, is open to returning to New York. The Knicks have also inquired about Walker Kessler and Nick Richards. Walker Kessler with the Utah Jazz, Nick Richards with the Charlotte Hornets, who just recently got an extension. Walker Kessler started 40 of 74 games as a rookie and then started 22 of 64 his second season. He kind of was plateaued, and his efficiency actually was just the same, but he is a guy who's averaged 12 points and 11.5 rebounds and just under 4 blocks. Supposedly people are going to listen to him. And then Richards coming off his best season of his pro, and he still has 2 years, $10 million, $5 million each year left. He averaged just under 10 points and rebounds and 1 block a game in 26 minutes a night. They were interested in it today, Valanciunas and Drummond, who all signed deals elsewhere. Let's bring back Precious Achua on a 3-year, $18 million deal, or $21 million deal. He's the energy big that this team needs. I think he just comes in and plays with the motor that I think they like, and especially a high energy big man who can actually dribble the ball a little bit, but he finishes inside. He doesn't do too much. He can play against bigger guys. He can play against smaller guys, and he just kind of fits Tom Thibodeau's style, and he's from the area. He played 24 minutes a night for them, 52% from the field, 26 from 3, 7 rebounds, 7 points a night, just under a block a game, about a steal. I don't know. I think it's worth it. Let's keep it. Why not? And I think just looking at a guy like Precious Achua, he's somebody that they clearly like, and they should resign him and bring him here, because Mitchell Robinson and Precious Achua and Jericho Sims is not that bad of a rotation. And if you're really scared about the big man rotation, you can still go out and get another guy. But I mean, they have Ariel Hakaporti, so I actually like it. They already have a third big, and they bring in back Precious Achua. I like it. Ariel, I know he recovered from that popped Achilles, and he's also, a pro for several seasons now. So actually like that one. Dude, can you believe this? People don't want Darius Garland. Yeah, that's what we're hearing. No market for Garland. I thought that was gonna rhyme. Also, whenever you say Darius Garland, is anybody else thinking here like want to say Garfield? So the report we're hearing from Brian Windhorst is that Darius Garland unlikely to trade, the no strong trade market, which is crazy. But I did bring it up because Darius Garland had back-to-back seasons where his numbers were identical, and this year, same exact usage rate, basically the same amount of touches. All his numbers go down across the board, and it makes you wonder why. Is he not that good? They clearly overpaid. It's a huge contract they gave him. You're almost paying Darius Garland $50 million at the end of it. I like Darius Garland, but not for $50 freaking million. Now, what are we hearing? So the future with Darius Garland, according to Brian Windhorst, has come into focus following the 3-year extension that Donovan Mitchell signed. We all knew that for the longest time that if Donovan Mitchell signed the extension, it meant that Darius Garland was going to be on the way out. And that was reported from The Athletic that Garland could request a trade from the Cavaliers if Mitchell decided to sign an extension. Mitchell and Garland have a strong working relationship, but there are questions if the on-court fit maximizes each of their talents, as it is basically 2 6'1" guards on the floor when they're out there. And the Cavaliers, however, do not appear to have any interest in trading Garland or any other member of their core 4 players, including Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. Garland and Allen are considered to be the most probable trade candidates, but Garland's market is not believed to be considered particularly strong at this time. Brian Windhorst said on ESPN's radio, quote, "I don't think the market is there for Darius Garland. I think Kobe Altman knows this, and he knew this even before DeJounte Murray got traded. I think it's a terrible time to trade Darius Garland, and so even if Darius Garland does ask for a trade, and I'll say it again, I'm not convinced that he will, nor am I convinced that he personally wants to be traded. I could change next time we talk. I could have a different set of information. I don't think the Cavs are going to trade him because I don't think it's a good time to trade. I don't think it's a good market to trade," end quote. Darius Garland signed a 5-year, $193 million deal with the Cavaliers during the 2022 offseason. He's entering year 2 of this offseason. So, like I said, why would he leave? Or why would he want out? And who wants to take that deal? I don't. And that's just where we're at with it. All right, let's talk the Kuzma. What's the news we're hearing here? So I think it's definitely interesting to see like Kyle Kuzma, who similar to Lauri Markkanen, is just always been in the rumors, and they're just like saying, no, you're going to have to give us a big deal. And obviously, I think Mikal Bridges' contract, I mean, not Mikal Bridges, but Mikal Bridges' value is not Kyle Kuzma value. I think that's more Lauri Markkanen value. However, I think a DeJounte Murray trade is what Kyle Kuzma goes for, which is likely multiple first-round picks for the Wizards or players of that caliber. Now, Kyle Kuzma is owed only $64 million over the next 3 seasons, and it is a descending contract. Kyle Kuzma's contract is viewed as a highly attractive asset to teams across the league, and he's a multi-positional player who can put up stats on a bad team or can be a really good role player on a championship team, like when he won a ring with the Lakers. Now, he's a contract that teams like as they want to improve in the short term while improving preserving the financial flexibility to round out the roster, similarly to how like the New York Knicks have done. Kuzma has improved his scoring efficiency and playmaking for others while routinely being the top cover on opposing scouting reports. The 7-year NBA veteran averaged 22 points, 4 assists, 46% from the field, and 77% from the free throw line. Now, the Kings are a team that I've consistently called, but they keep offering Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter, and the Wizards keep hanging up the phone as a result. So it makes you wonder what is and will that trade, or what will that trade look like if they do. I think Kuzma stays, and I just think it's just looking like this is a guy that, especially with the Wizards, how they're going, I just don't think they want to like let their team just look abysmal out there, and they want their players to have people out there. And right now, if you look at it, Jonas Valanciunas, Alex Sarr, Kyle Kuzma, Corey Kispert, Jordan Poole, with Carlton Carrington, Malcolm Brogdon, Landry Shamet, Bilal Coulibaly, Rashawn Holmes, Marvin Bagley, and Keyshawn George, Pat Baldwin, and Jared Butler is not a bad, like, there's worse teams out there is all I'm saying. So I think they're continuing to be patient, and they're not going to feel forced to have to trade him. So just expect, obviously them to not to do anything brash or crash. I don't even know. I think it's brash. But what would you guys do if you guys were the Washington Wizards? Would you guys go ahead and trade Kuzma at this point? I feel like his value is going to remain high and that they'll be able to trade him down the road regardless if they think that they have to trade him right now. But I'm definitely curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. It's just Kuzma being the type of player that he is. I think he's just going to be coveted at least from now. Like his value will remain the same regardless of his season next year from here to next year. And I think that's a fine bet. And I think his value could get even higher by the trade deadline if they wanted, because teams will be desperate to add a player like him because of his contract. It's one that you could add mid-season where it wouldn't fluster your roster. Like you could trade for Kyle Kuzma for a similar package you gave up for Grant Williams, maybe a little bit more draft pick compensation. All right. Let's talk about Miles Bridges. What is this report we're hearing? Yes, Miles. This one blows my mind. So Miles Bridges is like a player that like people, you have to understand, like he's probably the best remaining free agent, and we have no idea. He's either gonna stay in. He's either staying in Charlotte or he's going to Los Angeles or he's going. I have no idea where. I would not be surprised if we're just throwing a curveball, but he's a guy who can play multiple positions. For a guy who had a year off, he came back, showed he is a solid shooter, 21 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 46% from the field, 35% from three. And what can you say? We're hearing maybe a signing trade to the Clippers, and I've said it before, he's probably signing a 4-year, $120 million deal. So if he were to go to the Clippers, you'd have to assume it's $15 million worth of salary they would have to send back. And if I were a betting man, I would assume that package would be built around either PJ Tucker, Russell Westbrook, and draft pick compensation, or it's a combination of Bones Highland, Amir Coffey, and Russell Westbrook or somebody else, because then obviously Russell Westbrook and or PJ Tucker would just get bought out if he were to go to the Clippers. I really just think the Hornets, their best bet is just to keep him because he would help the team win. The Kings, if they did the deal, I know they have Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes that they're offering. If you took Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter and some picks, there's that. But this is coming from The Athletic. I think it's interesting as it have to take a sign and trade. They're saying the Clippers with a draft pick. They're just saying not even assets, or are they saying an assets and a draft pick? And a player who's been discussed is allegedly Norman Powell, who makes $19 million, or Terrence Mann, who makes $11.5. So people close to Bridges said that after seeing how the Clippers owner Steve Ballmer has been willing to give players a second chance, the team would be a great fit for him, and Bridges has learned from his mistake. And adding Josh Green, allegedly, according to James Plowright, does not impact Miles Bridges' situation. Even if Charlotte re-signed Bridges, they have $30 to $40 million buffer to luxury tax, and still enough to absorb Josh Green's salary. Guys, like, I don't think you let Miles Bridges walk, because how are you supposed to replace Miles Bridges, in my opinion? I just don't think you trade Miles Bridges. It's, in my opinion, I mean, maybe Detroit's a team because he has that Detroit's connection. I would love Kate Cunningham, Miles Bridges, and Tobias Harris, but that would be way too much shit for Trajan Langdon to do in his first offseason as the new president. That would just be rolling the dice hard, man. Balls. That would take balls. I really like the idea of him maybe heading west. I think he either heads west or he stays in Charlotte. Again, I think Charlotte should keep him because, like, you're going to get him cheaper than for what he really is. You're going to be able to lock him up long term. And who are you going to replace his quality of player with? You're not. So in that case, I think you just keep him, and I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine with whoever he ends up. What if a team like Golden State or some random team that we don't even expect just trades for him? Like over here, what about Philly? I think they don't have the money anymore. Maybe they do Paul Reed, but I think they're toast in terms of money. There's not a ton of teams that are going to be able to do this. So definitely curious to hear or see how that one plays out. All right, Lauri Markkanen. Allegedly, the Warriors want to go all in. Lauri Markkanen is eligible to renegotiate and extend his contract. We know Utah's Danny Ainge and Justice Zanuck have received a bevy of interest from teams around the league regarding Lauri Markkanen. And from what I know, Lauri Markkanen is not expected to be traded anytime soon. The league-wide belief is that Jazz would only consider moving Markkanen for a similar trade package to what the Knicks gave up for Mikal Bridges, a player Utah tried to acquire and pair with Markkanen. For context, New York overwhelmed the market for Bridges, who has 2 years on his contract, by agreeing to trade 4 unprotected first-round picks, an unprotected pick swap, and a protected first-round pick. Markkanen is owed $18 million this season and is in the final year of his contract, but is extension eligible. Utah has inquired about other star players like Damian Lillard in the past year. This is perceived a needle-moving point for Utah this offseason for many executives around the league over the next year or so. Opposing executives believe the Jazz will either find a star player to pair with Markkanen in an attempt to compete at a higher level, or they're going to have to trade Markkanen while his value is at its highest and retool the roster and go into a legit rebuild as they try to build future long-term sustainable success. Now, the Warriors, Kings, and Spurs, and Timberwolves and Pelicans are all people who've interested in trading for Markkanen. Regarding Golden State, its top trade asset is Jonathan Kuminga, but they would not trade Jonathan Kuminga for Lauri Markkanen. Sacramento has shopped Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes. And Utah, however, would ask for Keegan Murray, who Sacramento has identified as a core piece that they believe it can be just as good as Lauri Markkanen. So you don't know if they're going to do there. San Antonio has draft assets such as Devin Vassell, who's untouchable. So it would have to be Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sohan that they dangle. While Minnesota is a tougher partner, unless Timberwolves are theoretically willing to move Karl-Anthony Towns or Jaden McDaniels in a package for Markkanen. And by all accounts, Minnesota appears to be willing to bring the core back together and will try to make a deeper playoff run. New Orleans has gauged the trade market for Brandon Ingram, and sources tell Hoops Hype that the Pelicans have other young assets in Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, and that they would be reluctant to get rid of those, but those are the ones that Utah would want. So a Brandon Ingram for Lauri Markkanen isn't going to happen. Karl-Anthony Towns and Jaden McDaniels for Lauri Markkanen isn't going to happen. So the only ones you're really looking at is, will Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and whatever young assets and draft assets be from the Spurs would be good enough? Would Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, and anyone not named Keegan Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, and Domantas Sabonis be good enough, and picks would be good enough for the Utah Jazz? And finally, would the Warriors be able to do a deal? And I think the Warriors know, out of all those teams, who can give the Jazz the best deal? And it's them. First off, Andrew Wiggins is the player that they can offer if they wanted to just do straight up salary. But if they tell him, hey, don't renegotiate the deal, we'll renegotiate the deal. And we'll send you a combination of like B-Pod, Gary Payton, and Kevon Looney and Moses Moody, or Moses Moody. Yeah, actually take off Kevon Looney. Moses Moody, Gary Payton, and B-Pod, and 2 first-round picks or 3 first-round picks for Lauri Markkanen. Do you go ahead and you do that? I think that's just something that you have to maybe consider. But yeah, I think that's where you're at when you're looking at how this is all going to go ahead. And I don't think his contract's that bad. And Andrew Wiggins, when you don't understand, Andrew Wiggins after the NBA Finals, arguably top 10 defender in the NBA, top 5 maybe. If you can get back to that, he actually finished the season strong. It's really not that bad. It's not like DeAndre Hunter. So I think there's room to do stuff. I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that one. I'm curious. It's an interesting one. I think the Warriors aren't doomed. I think they'll be able to make some movers. Uh, the Warriors are going to wait to rebuild after Steph Curry. I think they're going to try to push the chips to the middle of the table for the last few years. That's it. That's everything I wanted to talk about. If you guys missed anything, you can go back. But I'm going to clip this so you can just wait for the clips to come out. Cheers.